Welcome to NuVoodoo Live. I'm Michael Connor. I'm with the NuVoodoo Marketing Department, joined by Lee Jacobs, EVP of Research, Interpretation, and Analysis. And boy, do we need you today because we're talking about all things Gen Z as far as radio listening goes.
Right.
And this is a generation that's wicked different. It's like, got my Boston hat on.
Well, it is. And, Gen Z just, in this sample, we started at age 14. We go up to 54. So the Gen Zs are the 14 to 27s as we nose into 2024.
So in the total sample, about 16%, which is pretty typical, down maybe a little bit, right, Lee, from the 22 other studies we've done, but around, what would you say, 1 in 6? Is that what you would like to say? 1 in 7?
That's what I've been saying.
Yeah.
1 in 6, qualify through as being willing to do the things they'd have to do to participate with Nielsen. And, they and their household over age 6 or 12, keeping a diary or carrying the various forms of meters around for the kind of meager rewards that Nielsen offers. So it's about a sixth of the sample overall, trending down by a skosh, but still holding up 16% as of this snapshot.
So we know that Gen Zs listen to less radio, are much more interest, streaming content, on-demand content, social media, and old legacy media like radio, even radio repurposed, in digital form, just not the thing for them. That's the bad news. I guess the good news is that, like with the RPS sample that we've talked about in video after video, that's more media active. These guys are more media active. That's the good news, as you're about to see. The bad news is this is like trying to shoot down a bullet.
But it always has been. I mean, we can go back for generations in Nielsen and Arbitron before it. And, you remember the headaches of trying to get 18 to 24s or 12 to 24s into their samples.
Yeah, it turns out pretty boxes and that extra dollar aren't enough to, convince the younger folks to, particularly African-American and Hispanic audience, to fill out that diary.
Right. So it's not really a shock, but nevertheless, It's sobering that instead of 16%, as we saw overall, 10%, 1 in 10 Gen Z's profile as being yeses to play the game with Nielsen, which means that, by the way, they're going to get weighted up in the final sample. It just means that if you get one, it can be really, really impactful. And if you don't get them, that can be really, really impactful.
And that's really the purpose of today's presentation is we're using RPS 23 data collected in January, but we're getting ready for RPS 24. So we're kind of setting the stage. So remember, the audience we're talking about is the 1 in 10 that would listen to the radio and fill out the diary in a generation that doesn't do a lot of both. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to focus on the extremes, Lee. And the reason I pulled the extremes, because this was my choice, not yours, is because we've now seen enough micro-targeting reports to know that there's so few people carrying meters that will give you much in the way of time spent listening as a percentage of the in-tab, right? It's just a handful of people that basically drive the ratings. And that's going to be true for Gen Z.
Absolutely. By the way, Mike, before you keep going, I'm looking at the incongruity of this guy wearing headphones, which are plugged into nothing I can see.
Yes.
With his left fist against a dial-tuned radio with an antenna. What's going on?
Yeah, that's Jim Nye, the AI guy in charge of the photorealistic content that you see. I like to think of it as Gen Z saying, oh, God, make that radio station stop. I want to listen to Spotify. But, again, I didn't give the instructions to the AI. By the way, I did tell the AI to remove spelling because it does not know how to spell in graphics. All right. So total sample. 24% would listen 5 or more days a week. Now, we know occasionally generally predict time spent listening, and that more occasions, PPM people, this all too well. And that's 1 in 4 of our total sample. Gen Z, it's far less, a good 1/3 less.
Right.
And but the RPS Gen Zs, mucho moro.
Right. And it's just what we've been talking about for years, in the sense that if you're offered to be part of this survey that Nielsen is conducting to track their radio listening and TV viewing, as it's told to them, if you don't do too much of that, it's a lot easier to say, yeah, no. And you're more likely to say yes if these are things you do in your real life. So it's no real shock that the Gen Zs who are likely to opt in to say okay to Nielsen are those who spend more time with radio.
So we call these extreme occasions, but I know you like to measure the top 2 box where we'd look at, I guess, 3+ days a week.
Sure. And at 3+ days a week, then for the total sample, you're talking 44%. You're heading toward half of the sample who say they use broadcast radio 3 days or more per week. Gen Z, 38%. A little bit smaller, but again, the good news is that self-selected group, the people who are likely to play with Nielsen among Gen Z, 3+ days a week, that's 58%, nearly 3 in 5 are listening to radio at least 3 days per week.
All right, so extreme radio listening. Now we'll think in terms of overall time spent listening over the course of a week. Again, you get somebody for 10 hours plus, and they're a panelist. It is New Year's Eve if they're in your target demographic. Total sample, not that available, right? It's about a little bit better than 1 in 10. Gen Z, same thing.
Right.
Gen Z RPS, yes, triple.
Ding, 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 ding. That's a winner, of course. And that's just the nature of the game we're playing. But it underscores, Mike, how incredibly important it is to be able to find the people who are likely to play the Nielsen game.
Yep, and I think with the top two responses, which is what is it, like 4 hours or more? I can't remember.
We relax it to 4 hours a week, and that's still a lot of time spent listening. Total samples a little over a third, 36%. Gen Z tracks right at that, around that number, 35%. But the Gen Z RPS likelies, those who are likely to play the Nielsen game for us, at 46%, nearly half.
Yep. So it's 1 in 10, but when you find them, 50% are going to give you this kind of massive time spent listening bump. All right. So just as a comparison, let's look at extreme media choices that we might predict to be better than that, even for RPS, yes, and versus radio listening. So total sample podcast listening, 16% at that extreme level. Gen Z, a little bit worse. I remember millennials were always kind of the bigger demo.
That's the epicenter of podcasts.
Yeah, no question about it.
Right.
But RPS, yes, it's certainly nothing like the millennials, but again, 1 in 3. So right around what radio is.
Yeah, it's nearly double. Well, it's actually double what the Gen Z overall population does. And it's the fact that people who like to listen to things, and that's going to be part of the definition of the people who are going to impanel with Nielsen, like listening to lots of different things, podcasts included. If you open it up, say, and call it 4 hours a week instead of 10, total samples at 40%, Gen Z, almost the same number, 41%, but the RPS likely Gen Zs at 53%.
Yep.
They are
big number.
Sponges.
All right. And then this is the one I would predict would be in the wheelhouse. This is extreming, as I like to call it, 10 hours a week. Total sample about 1 in 4, a little bit better, a little under 1 in 3 for Gen Z, but timpani, 4 in 10 Gen Zs are in the 10-hour camp. So that's a lot of competition that radio has among the percentage of the sample that's predisposed to giving them a TSL bump.
And listen, we like talking about, audio media usage for across everything that we're discussing. But the truth is you're looking at Gen Z and frankly, millennials to boot, you're looking at people who have so many more entertainment options, things that they can do than maybe us baby boomers or even the Gen Xers are thinking about. So across looking at DSPs, if we lower the bar to just 4 hours a week, total sample, 53%, Gen Z, 60%, and the RPS likely Gen Zs, nearly 2 in 3, 64%.
And by DSPs, digital streaming platforms.
Right.
Yep. So we've done other videos about DSPs, demand-side platforms. That has to do with programmatic digital media buying.
Demand-side platform is going to be the winner of that TLA DSP.
Yep. Although I like the acronym for streaming, but I got outvoted by the industry. Okay. So provocative picture. Let me tell you what I had to do to get around ChatGPT's restrictions about unsafe content, because having somebody mainline like a heroin addict on their mobile phone didn't cut it. But so the next 2 sections are all about, okay, it's 1 in 10 RPS yeses in Gen Z. We know they give a lot of time spent listening to radio and a lot of occasions. So when you find one, it's New Year's Eve. So now in terms of where to get your message to try to switch pitch the most likely audience, to both define them and to then convert them to higher time spent listening levels, we need to know about where to find them and where they listen or consume, I guess the better word, a lot. Right. So we looked at addictive levels of social media app use. This is 10 times a day or more. Typically our chronic level is what, Lee? 4 times a day, I think. Yep. So this would be uber compulsive listening.
Right.
So let's start with, there's a whole bunch of apps. The one thing I want to disclaim is that I removed Google from the equation because the Google app, yes, it's highly used by every generation, but you agree with me, there's a lot of use cases for Google.
Sure. And not necessarily as much engagement because you're looking up a thing so often. You want the one thing and I'm done. I'm not scrolling to see what my friends are doing or just seeing if I can be entertained for a few minutes looking at, a video of something or another.
Yep. And Google is ubiquitous. It can be on, it can be an ad in Gmail. It can be an ad in one of the apps they have. It can be an ad across their ecosystem. Google is everywhere. All right. So these are the top 3. Think of these more as social type apps. 10 times a day of listening. This was a big surprise to me. The number 3 platform for, again, RPS, yes, Gen Zs was Facebook. Total sample. Listen, there's no surprise that the younger part of the generational spectrum isn't using a whole lot of Facebook these days. And so total sample 14, Gen Z at 8%. Look at this. Almost 1 in 3 Gen Zs clocking in at uber compulsive Facebook users. What do you think that is? You only have so many friends, we have a lot more family?
I think it's some of, we've talked about it for years, that the ratings likelies are really not the cool kids.
Right.
So yeah, we know that generationally Zs are likely, to connect with Facebook to show the side of their life that they want their parents to see. It's kind of the reality. So maybe we've got some of that too. I mean, if you bring it back to the numbers that I'm more comfortable with, the 4 time a day kind of level as compulsive, Facebook's 49%, almost half on a 4 time a day kind of basis. It is another way to stay in touch with family and relatives.
Yep. And we have to remember that Facebook is part of the Instagram ecosystem where you'll undoubtedly understand that Gen Z uses a lot more Instagram, RPS friendly or not. And so running advertising on those 2 platforms, remember, advertising when you have this level of compulsive usage is all about frequency. All right. So number 2, and yeah, I doubt this teen male is dreaming about his Facebook account right now, where he's trying to hook up with that girl that he met at the concert. I think that's probably a different platform. But at 10 times a day, number 2 platform is, not surprisingly, TikTok. Not a huge place for uber compulsive consumption across the total sample. This is generationally skews very young. Right. Gen Z, about 1 in 5 at the compulsive level. Gen Z, RPS, yes, a good 50% higher even still at 1 in 3.
It's such a sticky platform. And you get these really periscope up kind of people who are likely to be part of the Nielsen sample. And you got a third at the 10 time a day usage. If you bring the bar down to 4 times a day, it's 52% of the Gen Z RPS likelies use TikTok 4 times a day. That's over half. That's massive.
All right. And then number 1 in our top tier of uber compulsive use, interestingly enough, we don't see Snapchat as a player in many forums, but this is not the first time we've seen this data. Total sample is less than 1 in 10. Right. Gen Z, it's still kind of a pretty decent minority compared to a lot of other Gen Z apps. Maybe things are different when Lee gives us the 4 or more times a day usage. But what is surprising is this is the most compulsively used social media app among Gen Zers who are RPS friendly. And we've seen this movie before. This is not the first study where I've seen data like this for Snapchat.
Yeah, it's, frankly, I think it's getting the reputation, particularly among Zs, it's kind of the nice place to be. It's often a more pleasant experience than TikTok. If you back it down to 4 times a day, that kind of at least 4 times a day, daily, compulsive kind of use. Now the Gen Z RPS ratings likelies are at 51%. And you remember it was 52 for TikTok. So it's all bunched together.
Yep.
You know,
I'd argue that, and I know I've advocated with our media trading team, stay on top of Snapchats. Normally we're recommending TikTok and Instagram and, YouTube and a few other things to find and influence this young end of the radio listening spectrum efficiently. But let's not forget that there's a chance TikTok goes away at the end of the year here in the US.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay. So compulsive use helps advertising campaigns when you're advertising a contest, trying to switch people into your program for short periods of time to tactically boost the ratings. But so frequency matters. And when somebody uses a platform a lot, you can run your advertising, you're going to get seen more often and earlier. And so the better chances of campaign results working in your favor. But that's assuming that your ad content will get seen, remembered, and engaged upon. And certainly you have an obligation to produce creative that will help get that done.
Right.
But we wanted to test 21 ad channels for ad effectiveness. We've done plenty of videos about this and about conversion statistics, but really radio, it's about engagement because we're generally setting an appointment offline. We're listening later in the car for that song of the day contest or whatever it is. So we want to know which would rank highest in not just general ad attention, but extreme ad attention. I think maybe you can explain the scale. It's a 1 to 6 scale.
Mm-hmm. So how often, it's basically how often do you pay attention to things advertised in each of these channels? And you're right. I'm fond of using a 6-point scale, looking at the top 2 boxes.
Yep.
But I know you're looking for pin the meter.
We're looking for the extremes. You know what? I'd argue this is sort of like it's one way to look at the data. When you're doing an auditory music test, for example, you want to look at the total popularity score for your demo, but you also like to look at the fave score, right? Because that's the stuff where people will not just listen through a song, but they'll turn it up, remember it, maybe to the point where the meter can actually detect it too. And there's all that. So extreme ad attention we'll define as pay attention all the time. To be fair to Lee, the top 2 boxes would include often, and we've mostly report on the often or always score. So this is a little different. Number 3, SMS text. When we call them ads, it's a little misleading because you can't generally place a media buy to advertise in text unless you've already got a relationship with the audience. This is about aggregating a large database. But once you do that and you get permission to retext, this is a vehicle where, it's about 1 in 5 in the total sample of 14 to 54-year-olds. And Gen Z, it's actually not that high.
Right. But wait for it.
Yeah, RPS, yes. Gen Z, it more than doubles at 41%. And my guess is, Lee, if you add the top 2 box,
then it becomes 56%. It's over half.
All right. So we're in a tie here for 3rd place with Snapchat. So again, showing up in the top 3. And remember, this is out of 21 channels.
Right.
14% of total sample. And this is not going to blow your socks off. If you're just a marketer marketing to Gen Z, there's way better platforms than this. But RPS, yes, again, a nick higher than SMS.
Yeah.
Top 2 bucks.
And if you add in the oftens, it goes up another 10 points. It's 51%.
Yeah, so half of the audience on Snapchat. And number 1, probably no surprise here. And remember, it is Facebook's accountability partner for the young end.
Right.
17% total sample. This is pay attention to always.
Always.
1 in 5 Gen Zs.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. And up another 12 points if we add in often. That 45 goes to 57. You're closing in on 3 and 5.
So, Lee, for the ones that would ask, well, what about TikTok? And there's a bunch of platforms. They all sort of bunch.
Sure.
Yeah. But TikTok, if I remember correctly, the RPS, yes, Gen Zs, I think it's the top 2 boxes are like 60%, something like that. I don't know if you have that info. If not, we can move on. All right. So pay attention all the time. Number 1, YouTube. Total sample, 22%. Gen Z, 21%. Now, this didn't rank as high in frequency of use. In fact, didn't make the top three. In terms of ad attention, Gen Z is at 48%.
Yeah. I mean,
and I think when you add the 5s and 6s, YouTube, well over 60% of the sample.
Yeah, easily. 65%, I think. Yeah, and TikTok is important, of course. I think it's often and always, I think it's 60%, which puts it ahead of Snap's top two boxes. And but these are massive channels.
Yep, they all cluster. I think between Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, you basically pick the thing that's most synergistic with your station, and the more convergent you are in general, the better a job you're going to be. And you've already got the Nielsen hot zips. You overlay those. You've got ads. You've hopefully message tests with Lee's department, or at least somebody. And then you're working with experts to help maximize the dollars across these platforms.
I don't think you can understress the importance of the creative being that which will connect to people that age, because it's different than it was. It's always different. Each new generation brings a new sensibility about it.
And RPS Yes Gen Zs also have the power to be able to see the Nielsen companion app through the back of their phone, which is what she's looking at down below. And of course, the companion app is what is now fed by meter data in real time. This helps lower the cost of Nielsen sample collection. And of course, the reason they do that is for that reason. But what it means is that they're constantly offering up incentives in real time to get people to carry that thing around and keep that app open so that they can lower their costs and provide some benefits in the form of national contest cash and local contest cash and bonus points and rewards. And so that's why contesting still works, even for a generation like this that you wouldn't expect. Again, not everybody, but that 1 in 10, right? 90%, yeah, your message, nobody cares.
Yeah,
but 1 in 10?
Yeah, and you've got the picture of somebody wearing the pendant. You don't see a lot of those in the wild.
Yep. So the messaging is important, but finding them is critical. And you need more than just Nielsen hot zips to do that. This is not necessarily a Gen Z sample, but it kind of shows the process that we go through, Lee, where you start out with a big city of 1 million folks, metro, and then you isolate things down to a Nielsen demo that makes sense for your format. And then you're plugging in some Nielsen hot zips, and you can see the potential universe goes down each time. But who's got the money to reach out even 160,000 qualified targets with enough reach and frequency to matter these days? It might have been helpful when we had real digital budgets, but now we get couch change. So what NuVoodoo does to help with that process is we have data points anonymized to protect the privacy of any individual of tens of thousands of respondents nationwide. So we have the ability not only to identify the folks that are more likely to fit the profile of Nielsen Yes through our data modeling and extrapolation via a process called lookalikes, but we're also able to segment based on time spent listening or time spent occasions. All these RPS questions, we ask them in the research that we do. And while we certainly never share anybody's data, we aggregate it, anonymize it, so we don't actually know where the people are or who they are. But we're able to, in a cloud, take a Facebook or a TikTok that provides these kind of custom audience and lookalike options to distill the marketplace down from 1 million people down to maybe 10,000 that are going to truly matter to your ratings. And when you work with our department, you get a lot of bang for the buck, Lee.
Yes, you do, Mike.
You do research, you do creative pre-testing, you do analysis of the type of messaging or the contest packaging ideas that are going to resonate most with the generations. And then we turn it over to the marketing department, where we manage campaigns every day, communicate regularly about the metrics that we're seeing, the adjustments we want to make, and we hold ourselves accountable. I'd say the two of us and the rest of the team, we lose as much sleep over the ratings of our clients as the program director, music director, and general manager or market manager do.
Absolutely. It matters, and we live it every day. And I don't know anybody else who's watching each of these campaigns with the specificity and the attention to detail that we are, because look, ultimately we're going to back the winners. The creative that wins, that works the best, is going to get the most budget put behind it. We're looking for what's working, what's getting connected with, and what, frankly, seemed like a great idea at the time, but isn't working as well. We'll pull back on that budget. We're trying to deploy it with an audience that does care about that particular creative.
And Lee, when is the last time when somebody contacted you and said, all right, corporate just approved our marketing allocation, but the book starts in 7 days. Can you be up and running with a digital campaign in a week? How many times have you said no?
Never.
Immediacy, 360 approach, multiple channels, implying our research, lookalike modeling, and creating custom audiences that allow us to go after that bullseye target can easily be done. When you give us the green light, we can have you up and running in a week. Bottom line, as Lee and I play ping pong, Gen Z listens to AM, FM radio far less. And we didn't show you the data, but I don't think we need to, right?
Right.
Music streaming, social media, in terms of the general population, that drives media consumption far more than radio these days.
Right. But it's just 10% of Gen Z who will participate with Nielsen radio ratings.
Yep. They weighted that up to the reality.
Right. And the good news is those who would participate, frankly, listen to more radio than those who wouldn't participate.
Yep. Nearly 40%, 5 day a week, and occasions matter, 27% at 10 hours a week. That's who's going to make or break your ratings.
Right. And if you're looking for the top three, and I love the term uber compulsively.
Yeah, I was trying to, is it uberly compulsive used? No, that doesn't work. So it's got to be an adverbial clause.
We'll let somebody else parse that.
Yeah, there you go.
But the big ones, the oh my gods, are Snapchat, TikTok, and Facebook. TikTok and Insta just like that much lower. There's no real point. We're going to deploy on all of them. But
yeah, it's all about where the ad's less expensive, where is it easier to model the audience. So there's a lot of other decisions. Now, of course, YouTube didn't show up in that in terms of occasions, but that's not what YouTube's specialty is. It's in engagement. YouTube is the platform where, because you always have the choice of whether to skip the ads, and in terms of a marketer, you have the ability to really fine tune exactly who sees the ads. And, by giving them the option of skipping whom you're engaging are going to end up being a high percentage of these Gen Z RPS yeses, because it is the platform where the often and always attention levels and that FOMO extreme attention level is highest.
Right. And we use our research, our data modeling capabilities, the advanced digital campaign management tactics to help clients find and influence that small subset of listeners
that we've been talking about. They're ratings friendly. They prefer particular formats. Yep. We know music tastes. We do the research.
Right.
And we know who listens to a lot of radio. So we're using data modeling. It's not like we know everybody in a market, but we know the data characteristics and then can find those lookalike from a data correlation perspective. Lee, how do you get in touch?
Easy enough. Tell me more at NuVoodoo.com.
I'm Mark Connor, Lee Jacobs, and thank you for watching NuVoodoo Live. We'll see you next time.
NuVoodoo builds digital products and conducts research and marketing campaigns for clients.
It's easy to get in touch. Drop us a line at tellmemore@NuVoodoo.com.